And Bill, I do want to start off particularly with the investigation, of course, that you brought to light, that Bloomberg reporters brought to light prior to that, and the documents that are at the center of that, and where exactly those mortgage documents originated from and how they got to your desk.
Well, those are public documents. Anybody who, frankly, can do some research with Google and get to county websites can easily find these documents. You know, the media, including yourself, it sounds like, are going to try to make this into some kind of witch hunt or something like that. Quite the contrary. This is self-evident. This is black and white stuff. And frankly, the fact that the media and so many people are asking questions in the elite class about this goes to show that people think that there are rules for some people and rules for other people. Mortgage fraud is prosecuted every day in this country. And I'm sorry to say, not really, though, that a politician or a public official in this case is now the subject of mortgage fraud. Normal people have to deal with this nearly every day in this country. This is nothing new. Defrauding people is nothing new. And now all of a sudden that you have somebody very powerful, now people have to question it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I believe that she committed mortgage fraud.
When you look at the documents that you have, the publicly available documents, I am curious whether you or anyone at your agency had a chance to actually speak to Lisa Cook, her lawyers, or any representatives about what you found in those documents.
Obviously, while I respect the question, anything that has to do with the federal investigation, I am not going to comment on. However, I would say, well, what is within the confines of the referral letter, of which I'm willing to speak about.
What is your involvement in the investigation, Bill?
Well, as you know, I'm the regulator of Fannie and Freddie, as well as the conservator of Fannie and Freddie, and so this is right in the bullseye of what my job is. I promised before the Senate, before I was confirmed by the Senate, that I would investigate mortgage fraud, and I'm not going to be intimidated by anyone. I'm not going to be intimidated by the media, the politicians. They can say whatever they want. If it's a Republican who's committing mortgage fraud, we're going to look at it. If it's a Democrat, we're going to look at it. If it's a wealthy politician or a lawyer, we're going to look at it. So we're not just looking at everyday people. And I'd say the one thing, Romaine, which is that we refer people almost every day. I refer people every week on a minimum to the Department of Justice for mortgage fraud. This is literally what I am required to do underneath the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008, which is to ensure the safety and soundness of the mortgage market.
When you say you're referring, you're talking about just rank and file people going through your own agency documents. Is that a routine process, or is this something that has been very specifically started over the last few weeks or months?
We look at fraud generally. We say, look, if everybody and anybody who knows about mortgage fraud, they can go to fraud tips at FHFA.gov. We will take in all of the requests and all of the submissions that people have. We've poured through many of these tips. We have seen just an insane amount of tips on mortgage fraud. Mortgage fraud is a huge issue in this country. So we get it from fraud tips at FHFA.gov. We get it through traditional other means, whether it be by mail or what have you. And also there's stuff in the media all the time as it relates to mortgage fraud. So we will take it from anywhere and everywhere. And again, our main focus is on the safety and soundness of the mortgage market.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess my question to you, Bill, is was there some kind of tip-off to look into Lisa Cook's documentation specifically?
As I have said publicly, there was a tip that we received. I do not comment on the source, identity, or any other means that we use during a federal investigation as it pertains to things that are outside of the referral letter. You can imagine that if we start exposing, whether it be on this investigation or other investigations, where we receive tips from, where we get whistleblowers from, this is a very serious thing. And so when people are trying to, in my view, intimidate whistleblowers, intimidate tipsters, I strongly condemn that. And if people have mortgage fraud, I encourage them to go to fraud tips at FHFA.gov and send us those mortgage tips.
Bill, have you been looking into any other Fed officials or any other government officials on something like this? Have there been any tips to look into those?
Again, I'm not going to comment on any specific investigations other than the ones that either have been made public by other people or that we feel comfortable speaking to, and that pertains to things within the confines of the referral letter.
When we talk about that referral letter, and Bill, you've seen the pushback on this, and we should kind of point out here that part of the concern right now isn't so much whether she or anyone else out there committed fraud, but I think a lot of people would like to know whether there is more of a coordinated effort.
But that is the issue, because you've been interviewing me now for 2 minutes, and you keep asking me about all of these tangential issues instead of asking about, did she sign these documents? I believe she did sign these documents.
Okay.
Is it mortgage fraud to say that you live in one area and not another area? Yes, it is mortgage fraud. So you're not focusing on the fraud. You're focusing on the investigators for purposes of trying to undermine what it is that she did, allegedly, and what it is that mortgage fraud and the risk that mortgage fraud poses to the system.
Well,
and we're not going to be intimidated. I mean, we swore an oath, and we are going to continue to prosecute mortgage fraud. It doesn't matter whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, a public official, or Joe Blow on the street.
Absolutely. And we are in agreement for that. But what we are doing here is we are actually focusing on both issues, both the potential for fraud, and we are digging deeper into that. And we should point out that Bloomberg has made concerted efforts to reach out to Lisa Cook and her representatives, to the Fed, as well as to folks in the White House and administration beyond you. At the same time, Bill, we also have raised concern about whether this might be a weaponization of your office, a weaponization of the White House. And I am curious if there has been direct, guidance from the White House to pursue this?
We discovered this within the confines of our charter that Congress has given us. We continue to receive tips within the confines that Congress has given us. As I said, people can go and email us. They can send us tips. We encourage that to happen. And that's how this was sourced. And it's going to continue to be sourced. And, just because now, somebody said to me earlier today, they said, mortgage fraud is being controversial by some people in the media because you've really hit on power. And that struck me because I'm like, shouldn't power be against mortgage fraud? It just doesn't make sense to me now that you have somebody who's in this type of position and now it's controversial and maybe now mortgage fraud isn't mortgage fraud. I mean, you saw the Federal Reserve president from Kansas City. That was quite an odd exchange that he had about, blaming the forms and stuff like that. Let's call it what it is. People have a responsibility. And people in power especially have a responsibility to read legal documents before they sign them.
Well, I mean, to that point here, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about a report that the Philadelphia Fed put out, I think back in 2023, specifically on this issue of owner occupancy fraud. Basically, the idea of putting on a mortgage application that you're going to use something at your primary residence and get a lower mortgage rate, which seems to be at the heart of the documents that you posted with regards to Lisa Cook. It was a pretty high number, something like a third. And in that report, they specifically used the phrase that this type of practice is, quote, broad-based across the U.S. Now, that's back in 2023. I am curious as to what measures the authorities, either your agency or other agencies, can take to actually reduce that trend of owner occupancy discrepancies.
We are working very actively on it. I appreciate the question. If you look at my Twitter feed, if you look at my testimony, we have made mortgage fraud a huge priority since the beginning. I didn't know any of these people were committing mortgage fraud when I, came on the job. I mean, I had heard about, different public reports and stuff like that. But, the amount of referrals, I am shocked now that I'm in office with how much mortgage fraud has gone on. So we have taken, I saw today,
have you actually taken
on another
formal
network.
legal action?
Hold on, let me finish. I heard on another network, they said, well, can't you use AI to do this? That's exactly what we did.
Okay.
We did months ago. We went and we partnered with Palantir at Fannie Mae. We held a massive press event. And we said, look, everybody beware. We are looking for mortgage fraud. We brought in Palantir. We have made tremendous efforts globally across the population, across the data set of loans from Fannie Mae. And it's startling to me that because you have one Fed governor, you try to make an excuse for it instead of saying this is wrong and this is prosecuted every day of the week for other people.
How many referrals have you made for some sort of criminal investigation?
A lot. Sometimes I do multiple per day and certainly multiple per week. And my agency, along with the Inspector General in my agency, works hand in hand with the Department of Justice, has done it under the Biden administration, did it under the Obama administration, did it under the first Trump administration. Mortgage fraud is prosecuted every day in this country. And as long as I'm in this seat, we're going to continue to eradicate fraudsters wherever we find them.
So it sounds like mortgage fraud is, I don't want to say common, common, but it's not uncommon either. Do you think there's a plausible reason for your findings? People do move and they don't always have a chance to update paperwork, and so paperwork gets left behind or is out of date. Do you think that that's a possibility here?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. I mean, as a general matter, I believe that occupancy fraud is wrong. I believe that when people sign a piece of paper and they go to a bank and they say that they represent to a bank that they're going to do something and then they do something different, I believe that that is bank fraud. I believe that that potentially is wire fraud. And I believe that that is, in the case of mortgages, often mortgage fraud. So, we have rules in this country. And I just say this, what is the point of laws if they're not going to be followed in this country? And if people don't like the laws that are on the books, well, then go and change the law. But if we have laws, and if I promised, which I did promise the Senate, to uphold the laws and follow the law and the statute, we have to follow the law and the statute, always.
Bill, I want to transition now to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the possibility of an IPO of these government-sponsored entities. What assurances, well, first of all, can you give us an update on where things stand with this potential IPO?
Well, the president decided many years ago to not sell this asset. It was one of the best decisions that's ever been done, in my opinion, from the presidency as it relates to assets that the U.S. government has had. Why? Because people wanted to sell it to investors for $100 billion, $150 billion. I think that number is north of $500 billion now that these assets are worth. Since taking office, not just focusing on mortgage fraud and other systemic issues like safety and soundness mandates, like we just spent the last 10 minutes on, but is also focused on driving value and treating Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as if they're businesses, taking cost out of these businesses that is redundant and unnecessary, and also making sure that we are always thinking about how do we, within the confines of the law and in the best interest of the American people, run these things as businesses. So if people aren't performing, we get rid of them. We don't keep them around for years and years and years and decades just because they're politically connected. And so I think that this has enabled the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac story to really, with President Trump's help, unlock a lot of value for the American people, and it'll be very interesting to see what the president decides to do in this regard.
Well, with regards, so I mean, I was looking at the video that you guys put out. I think it came through the White House's account about the Great American Mortgage Company. So basically, the combination of these two, also what does appear to be a rebranding of your agency and this U.S. financial technology segment, which I guess would sort of help with regards to the securitization. Now, is the idea all of that, Bill, would be under the same umbrella, and I assume that you would be at the helm?
Well, we'll see. I mean, these companies are in conservatorship, as you know, which basically means that the president is in charge of these companies. And there was a Supreme Court ruling which made that very clear. I would say that any and all options are on the table. One of the things that I've been focused on, Romaine, has been, since getting in this seat, is on creating value. Now, what the president ultimately decides to do with that value is entirely up to him. But we had a thing called Common Securitization Solutions. Nobody understood what this thing was, generally out there. And so we decided to rebrand it as U.S. FinTech and really focus on what it is, which is financial technology. I believe this business is worth billions and billions of dollars. It was previously neglected, in my view. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have put almost $1 billion into this platform, and so we're unlocking value there. And then with Fannie and Freddie, we'll see. We'll see if the name has changed. We'll see if these things are there. But we're trying to aspire to a new tomorrow. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were these once nearly bankrupt assets, or bankrupt assets, many people would say, and we're trying to revitalize those. These should be great American icons. We are the greatest economy in the world, and we have a great president, and we are going to use these assets to benefit the American people and get the most value out of these assets that we can.
Do you have any sense of a timetable of maybe when that will either get done, or at least we'll get a little bit more guidance, the public will get more guidance on when that will be done?
That'll entirely be up to the president. The only one who knows that is in his brain, and so I'll let him decide on timing, of course. But I would say that the president's very interested in this issue, and it's very nice to have a president who cares about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.